The communication room was quiet, almost too quiet. Hyum-Ki Park stood completely still, her fingers pressed against the cold surface of the digital screen. The report in front of her seemed to mock her with its clinical, emotionless words. Each line was a knife twisting deeper into her heart. Jae-hoon had been more than just her son. He was her world, her hope, her everything. At 23, he had been chosen for a special program, a diplomatic exchange that was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime. Young, brilliant, and full of dreams, Jae-hoon had been selected to represent humanity on Epsilon 9, a neutral research station floating at the edge of known space. The report told a different story now. Words like experimental procedure, unauthorized research, and subject specimen jumped out from the screen. Hyum-Ki's hands began to shake. These weren't just words. They were a death sentence for her child. Epsilon 9 was supposed to be a place of scientific discovery, a meeting point for different species to share knowledge. Jae-hoon had been excited about the opportunity. He had called his mother just weeks before his deployment, his voice filled with a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Mom," he had said, "this is my chance to make a difference, to show the universe what humans can do." Now those words echoed in her mind like a painful memory. The Krelvax research team had claimed it was a standard biological study. They said Jae-hoon had volunteered, but the report told a different truth. Small print revealed the horror. Experimental procedures that pushed the boundaries of what any ethical scientist would consider acceptable. They had used him like a lab rat, testing technologies and biological responses without proper consent. Hyum-Ki read the report again and again. Each time, her anger grew stronger. 5 cycles had passed since Jae-hoon's disappearance. 5 long cycles of waiting, hoping, and searching. The Universal Diplomatic Council had brushed off her initial complaints. Insufficient evidence, they had said. Complicated interspecies research protocols. They had explained. To them, Jae-hoon was just another statistic, another small piece in their large, complicated political puzzle. But to Hyum-Ki, he was everything. She remembered the day he was born, the way he looked up at her with those bright, curious eyes, how he would take things apart just to understand how they worked, how he loved science and believed in the power of knowledge. Jae-hoon had always been different, not just smart, but compassionate. He believed in understanding, in communication, in the potential of different species working together. And now he was gone, killed by the very system he had believed in. The communication room began to feel smaller. The walls seemed to close in on her. Hyum-Ki took a deep breath. Her background as a special operations engineer kicked in. Years of training, of strategic thinking, of solving complex problems. They all focused into a single point of clarity. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. She knew the official channels would not help her. Diplomacy had failed. Legal systems had failed. The Universal Council had turned a blind eye to her son's murder. Her fingers moved across the screen, accessing databases and communication networks. Years of connections, of underground contacts, of military relationships. She would use every single resource. The Krelvax thought they had gotten away with their crime. They thought a human mother would accept their bureaucratic excuses. They were wrong. Very wrong. As the screen flickered with the first traces of her research, Hyum-Ki Park made a silent promise. To her son, to herself, to the universe. Justice would be served, no matter the cost. The old storage unit looked like nothing special from the outside. A simple metal container tucked away in a forgotten industrial zone on the outskirts of New Seoul. But inside, it was a different world entirely. Hyum-Ki moved carefully, her fingers tracing the edges of specialized equipment she had kept hidden for years. Most people would have sold or destroyed these tools after leaving military service. Not her. Something had always told her to keep them, to maintain them, to be ready. Now she understood why. Her military background wasn't just a job. It had been a way of life, Special operations engineering meant more than building machines. It meant understanding systems, breaking them, rebuilding them. Each piece of equipment around her was a memory, a potential weapon. She pulled out a small case. Inside, a network of microprocessors gleamed under the dim light. These weren't standard communication devices. These were custom-built tools that could slip through the most secure digital barriers. Jae-hoon would have loved to see them, she thought. He always appreciated good technology. The pain of his memory made her hands clench for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and continued her work. Information was her first weapon, and she knew exactly where to start. Her old military contacts weren't official connections anymore. They were ghosts. People who moved between shadows, who knew how to find things that were supposed to stay hidden. She began making calls, not through regular communication channels. These were encrypted lines, bounced through multiple systems, impossible to trace. "I need everything on the Krelvax research facility," she told her first contact, a man named Park who once worked in military intelligence. "That's dangerous ground," he warned. "The diplomatic corps has marked that area as strictly off-limits." Hyun-ki's response was simple. "I'm not asking for permission." One by one, her network activated. An old colleague who now worked in deep space cargo transport. A former classmate running a data brokerage service. A retired military hacker who owed her a favor from years ago. Each contact brought a piece of the puzzle. The Krelvax weren't just another alien research team. They were a complex organization with connections across multiple star systems. Their research facilities were protected by layers of legal barriers and diplomatic immunities. Normal channels would never work. But Hyun-ki wasn't interested in normal channels. She spread the first set of digital files across a holographic display. Star charts, research facility layouts, supply chain information, communication logs. Each piece of data was carefully analyzed, cross-referenced, examined from every possible angle. Most people would have been overwhelmed. For Hyun-ki, this was familiar territory. Her workspace began to transform. Specialized cooling systems hummed quietly. Custom-built computer arrays processed information at speeds most systems couldn't match. Holographic displays showed rotating 3D models of Krelvax facilities. She wasn't just collecting information. She was building a battle plan. Days turned into weeks. Sleep became something optional. Food was just fuel. Every moment was dedicated to understanding her enemy. Their weaknesses, their systems, their blind spots. The Krelvax thought they were untouchable, protected by laws, by diplomatic immunity, by the vast, complex bureaucracy of interstellar politics. They were wrong. A mother's love was more powerful than any legal document, more persistent than any bureaucratic system, more dangerous than any weapon, and Hyun-ki Park was just getting started. As the final pieces of her preparation fell into place, she looked at a small photograph of Jae-hoon. Her son smiled back, full of hope and potential. "I'm coming," she whispered. "I promise." The maintenance drone looked ordinary. Silver gray, about the size of a small delivery box, it moved with the kind of precision that would never catch anyone's attention. That was exactly how Hyun-ki designed it. From the outside, Proxima 7's research moon looked peaceful. Smooth metallic buildings stood against a dark gray landscape. Massive communication arrays pointed toward distant star systems. Security systems hummed with what seemed like perfect efficiency. But nothing is ever truly perfect. Hyun-ki sat in a small dark room thousands of kilometers away. Her fingers moved across specialized control panels. Each touch was precise, each movement calculated. Years of engineering training had prepared her for this moment. The drone wasn't just a simple machine. It was a weapon, a carefully designed instrument of destruction that looked like nothing more than routine maintenance equipment. Krelvax security systems would scan it. They would see exactly what they expected to see. They wouldn't see what was hidden inside. As the drone approached the facility's main research wing, Hyun-ki's breathing remained steady. Her eyes never left the screens. Multiple displays showed different views: thermal readings, security grid layouts, internal facility maps she had spent weeks collecting. The first stage was simple: infiltration. Most security systems work by looking for obvious threats. They watch for big changes, sudden movements, unusual energy signatures. But this drone moved exactly like hundreds of others that serviced the facility every single day. When it finally reached the main research wing, nothing seemed wrong. Inside the drone, a carefully designed package began to activate. Not a bomb, not a traditional weapon, something far more precise. A neural disruptive agent specifically engineered to target Krelvak's physiological systems. Hyun-Ki had spent months studying Krelvak's biology, their genetic structure, their cellular weaknesses, every research paper, every medical report. She knew them better than they knew themselves. The agent wasn't designed to kill instantly. It was designed to break down their most critical research systems from the inside. First, the environmental controls began to shift. Tiny, almost invisible changes that would look like simple maintenance errors. Temperature fluctuations, pressure adjustments, oxygen mixture modifications. Most monitoring systems wouldn't even notice. But inside the facility, things started to change. Research samples began to degrade. Cellular structures started to break down. Complex experiments that had taken years to set up began to fall apart. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in the kind of systematic failure that would look like a terrible accident. Hyun-Ki watched the screens. Each display showed different layers of the facility systems. She could see the gradual breakdown. Precise, controlled, devastating. This wasn't just revenge. This was a message. Hours passed. The facility's systems continued to fail. Not quickly, not obviously, but with the kind of slow, systematic destruction that would take months to fully understand. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the damage would be irreversible. The maintenance drone completed its cycle and moved away from the facility. To any outside observer, it would look like a normal piece of equipment finishing its routine check. No alarms triggered, no immediate signs of attack. Just slow, calculated destruction. Back in her hidden room, Hyun-Ki allowed herself a small moment. She looked at the photograph of Jae-hoon sitting next to her control panel. "This is for you," she whispered. The first strike was complete. And this was just the beginning. The emergency session of the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps looked like a scene from a nightmare. Holographic screens filled the massive circular room. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat or stood, their various body shapes creating a weird mix of shapes and colors. Everyone was angry. The Krelvak's delegation looked the worst. Their blue-green skin had turned a sickly pale color. Strange tentacle-like appendages twitched nervously. They had lost months of critical research, years of work destroyed in a way no one could explain. "This is an act of war," screamed the Krelvak's lead representative. His voice translator made him sound even more frustrated. Clicks and strange sounds mixed with the translated words. Other species joined the complaint. The Quantum Collective, the Silicon Nexus, the Biological Consensus. Each had different complaints, but they all pointed in one direction: humanity. The human representative sat very still. A woman in a crisp blue uniform. She showed no emotion. Her job was simple: deny everything. "The United Earth government has no knowledge of this incident," she said carefully. Each word was chosen with extreme precision. "We condemn any unauthorized actions against the Krelvak's research facility." Behind closed doors, things were different. Hyun-Ki watched the diplomatic session through special encrypted channels. She had built her own network of information sources. Getting access to this meeting was child's play for someone with her skills. The human government was doing exactly what she expected. They would protect themselves first. They would deny any connection to her actions. They would treat her as a rogue agent if she was discovered. But she didn't care. Her son was dead, killed by research teams that thought they could do anything they wanted. No laws, No consequences, just pure scientific curiosity without any moral limits. The diplomatic session continued. Hours of arguments, accusations, threats. The Krelvax wanted punishment. They demanded complete investigation. They wanted access to human communication networks. They wanted to search for whoever had destroyed their research facility. But they would find nothing. Hyumki had covered her tracks perfectly. Every digital trail was false. Every communication route was blocked. She was a ghost in the system. Other species began to take sides. Some demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Others wanted more investigation. The Silicon Nexus suggested complete communication blackout with human systems. The room was a mess of different languages. Translation systems worked overtime. Holographic displays showed complex relationship charts. Political connections twisted and turned like complicated spider webs. No one noticed the small details, the tiny inconsistencies in the attack on the research facility. No one saw how perfectly the destruction had been planned. Except Hyun-Ki. She had planned this moment for months. Every possible response, every possible reaction. She knew exactly how the diplomatic systems would respond. Bureaucracy was predictable, especially when different species were involved. Her next move was already being prepared. This was just the first step. The human representative continued to deny everything. Cool, calm, professional. She was doing her job perfectly. Protecting human interests, maintaining diplomatic relationships. But Hyun-Ki knew the truth. Justice would come, no matter what diplomatic games were being played. Her son deserved more than just another report, more than just another statistic in some alien research log. As the diplomatic session continued, Hyun-Ki allowed herself a small smile. They had no idea what was coming. Not yet. The supply line looked normal from a distance. Massive cargo ships moved between star systems, carrying resources that kept entire civilizations running. Most people would see nothing special. Hyun-Ki saw everything. Her fingers moved across specialized screens. Each touch was like playing a complex musical instrument. Years of engineering training had taught her that systems were just complicated puzzles waiting to be solved. The Krelvax supply network was massive. Hundreds of cargo routes, thousands of ships, millions of resource transfers happening every single day. Most people would be overwhelmed by the complexity. She was not most people. Digital tools appeared on her screens. Not weapons, not bombs. Something far more dangerous. Invisible systems that could break entire economic networks without firing a single shot. Her first target was a communication relay near the Orion cluster. It looked like a standard navigation point. Satellites, communication arrays, nothing special. But Hyun-Ki knew better. She had spent weeks studying every single communication pathway, every digital route, every tiny connection point. Most people would see a complex network. She saw weak points, tiny holes that could be exploited. The first attack was silent. Tiny code fragments began to move through the system. Not viruses, not traditional hacking tools, something more sophisticated. Pieces of digital instruction that would slowly change how information moved. Cargo manifests started to shift. One shipment would be delayed by hours. Another would be redirected slightly. Small changes that looked like normal system errors. Nothing would seem wrong at first. But over time, the changes would add up. The Krelvax relied on perfect timing. Their entire economic system was built on precise resource management. When those systems started to break down, everything would become complicated. Ships would arrive at wrong locations, resources would be misplaced, entire supply routes would become inefficient, and no one would know why. Hyun-Ki tracked everything on her screens. Multiple displays showed different layers of the system. Cargo routes, communication networks, resource transfers. Each screen was a window into a different part of the Krelvax infrastructure. Her son's research files became her battle plan. She had learned everything about their systems from the research documents, every technological weakness, every potential point of failure. Things the Krelvax thought were perfect. She saw the tiny cracks. Days turned into weeks. The supply network began to feel the pressure. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just slow, steady breakdown. Cargo ships started to report strange navigation issues. Communication relays showed tiny delays. Resource transfers became less efficient. To most observers, these would look like normal system errors, but they were anything but normal. Each small change was carefully designed. Each digital instruction was a precise weapon. Hyun-Ki was not just attacking. She was systematically dismantling an entire economic system. The Krelvax would not understand what was happening. Not at first. She looked at her son's photograph. "This is for you," she whispered again. The same words she had said when she launched her first attack. Her fingers continued to move across the screens. The next phase was already being prepared. And this was just the beginning of her plan. The universe thought it knew how revenge worked. It was about to learn something new. The first message came through an encrypted channel. Just a few words. Simple, direct, painful. "My daughter was taken too." Hyun-Ki stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the communication interface. She hadn't planned to create a network. She had only wanted justice for her son. But people found her anyway. They were everywhere. Parents who had lost children to alien research programs. Families who had been silenced by bureaucratic systems. People who had watched loved ones disappear into the vast, cold universe of scientific exploration. Some were from Earth. Others came from distant colony worlds. Each had a story. Each had a loss. The communication network grew slowly, not through official channels, not through government systems, but through whispers, through carefully hidden digital pathways, through people who had nothing left to lose. A woman from a mining colony on Titan, a father from a research station near Jupiter, a couple who had lost their child during a diplomatic exchange program. They all found each other. Hyun-Ki became more than just a person. She became a symbol. Her attack on the Krelvax research facility wasn't just an isolated incident anymore. It was a beacon of hope for those who had been forgotten. Those who had been told to be quiet, to accept their loss, to move on. They would not move on. Each new contact brought more information, more stories, more pain, but also more strength. People shared what they knew about research facilities, about hidden laboratories, about the dark side of interstellar scientific exploration. The Krelvax were not the only ones. Other alien species had similar research programs, places where living beings were treated like experimental subjects, where consent was just a word, where life meant nothing compared to scientific curiosity. Hyun-Ki began to organize, not like a military commander, but like a support network. Each person brought something different. Technical skills, information networks, emotional support. They were not an army. They were a family. Communication became their weapon. Information their shield. Shared pain their connection. Some wanted direct action. Others preferred slow, careful planning. Hyun-Ki listened to everyone. She understood that each person's grief was different. Each person's path to justice was unique. The network grew. Digital channels became meeting points. Encrypted messages became support systems. What started as a personal mission became something much larger. They shared research, tracked facilities, collected evidence, not to start a war, but to bring accountability. Hyun-Ki was careful. She knew the risks. Discovery could mean complete destruction of their network. Government systems would crush them if they were found. Alien research facilities would silence them quickly. But they were done being silenced. Each message was carefully coded. Each communication carefully planned. They were ghosts in the system, invisible, powerful. The resistance had no official name, no central leadership, just a shared purpose: justice. Hyun-Ki looked at the growing network of connections, hundreds of lines connecting different points, different stories, different painful experiences. Her son's photograph watched from the side of her workstation. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. The universe was about to learn something important. People would no longer accept being victims. They would become survivors. They would become fighters. The safe house looked ordinary. A small building on the edge of a colony settlement. Nothing special. Nothing that would catch anyone's attention. But it was a trap. Hyun-ki had planned this moment for months. Every single detail was carefully prepared. The Krelvax thought they were hunting her. They didn't know she was waiting for them. Her network had tracked the strike team's movement. Elite soldiers, specially trained, equipped with the most advanced technology their species could create. They believed they were the hunters. They were wrong. The first signs of their approach came through silent sensors. Hyun-ki watched multiple screens. Each display showed a different view of the surrounding area. Thermal readings, motion sensors, communication frequencies. She was ready. The Krelvax strike team moved like professional hunters. Their bodies were a mix of biological and mechanical parts. Enhanced vision, improved reflexes, weapons that could cut through most standard defenses. But they had never faced someone like Hyun-ki. Her preparation went beyond simple planning. Years of special operations training had taught her one important lesson. The best defense is a trap that the enemy doesn't see coming. The first team member approached the building. Careful steps. Scanning systems active. Advanced sensors looking for any potential threat. They found nothing. Or so they thought. Inside the building, systems began to activate. Not weapons, not traditional defenses, something far more complicated. The air began to change. Molecular structures shifted. Frequency waves started to interfere with their enhanced sensory systems. Nothing would look wrong at first, but everything was wrong. The strike team's communication systems began to fail. Small interruptions, tiny signal breaks, nothing that would immediately raise an alarm, just enough to create confusion. Hyun-ki watched from her hidden control center. Each movement was calculated, each system response precisely timed. The first team member entered the building, then the second, then the third. They moved like professional hunters, weapons ready, senses alert. They had no idea what was coming. Molecular disruptors began to activate, not killing systems, something more precise. Systems that would slowly break down their enhanced biological components. Tiny changes that would happen so slowly they wouldn't understand until it was too late. Their enhanced vision started to blur. Communication systems became less reliable. Muscle responses became slightly slower. One by one, they realized something was wrong. But by then, it was too late. Hyun-ki had studied every single aspect of Krelvax biology. Their research reports, their medical documents. Everything Jae-hoon had collected became her battle plan. The strike team tried to retreat, but the building was designed to prevent escape. Every exit was a carefully prepared trap, every wall a potential weapon. They had come to hunt her. They would become her message. Hours passed. The building remained silent from the outside. Nothing would suggest the complex battle happening inside. When it was over, only one thing remained clear. The Krelvax had made a mistake. They had underestimated a mother's love. They had underestimated human determination, and they would pay the price. Hyun-ki looked at her son's photograph. "It's not over," she whispered. "Not yet." The data dump happened without warning. Millions of research documents appeared across universal communication networks. Encrypted files, medical reports, secret recordings. Every single piece of evidence about alien research programs suddenly became visible. No one could hide anymore. Hyun-ki had been planning this moment for months. Each document was carefully selected, each piece of evidence precisely prepared. This was not just an attack. This was total exposure. The Krelvax research facilities were just the beginning. Other alien species found themselves under the spotlight. Hidden research programs, illegal experiments, facilities where living beings were treated like nothing more than test subjects. Everything was now public. Universal communication networks exploded with information. News channels, information streams, digital platforms. They all carried the same story. Decades of secret research, countless lives destroyed, scientific curiosity that had crossed every possible ethical line. The Interstellar Diplomatic Corps went into emergency session. Again, but this time was different. No more closed doors, no more secret meetings. Everything was being watched. Millions of people from different species were demanding answers. The old systems of protection were falling apart. Hyun-Ki's network of parents and survivors shared every single detail. Technical experts broke down complex research documents. Lawyers analyzed legal loopholes. Medical professionals explained the human cost of these experiments. They were not just victims anymore. They were witnesses. The universal laws that had protected research facilities began to crumble. Diplomatic immunities meant nothing when the entire universe was watching. Species that had thought themselves untouchable now faced complete exposure. Some research directors tried to run. Some tried to hide. They found nowhere to go. Every communication channel was tracked. Every potential escape route was monitored. The network Hyun-Ki had built was more than just a group of angry parents. It was a complete system of accountability. Governments began to fall, not through violence, but through exposure. Hidden research programs were shut down. Facilities were closed. Scientists who had thought themselves above the law were now facing universal justice. The medical community was shocked. Researchers who had believed their work was secret now found themselves completely exposed. Their unethical practices were laid bare for everyone to see. No more hiding behind complex scientific language. No more treating living beings like experiments. Hyun-Ki watched from her hidden location. Each screen showed different parts of the universal response. News channels, diplomatic meetings, legal proceedings. Everything was changing. Her son's death was not just a personal loss anymore. It had become a turning point for the entire universe. Other parents joined her. They spoke at universal hearings. They shared their stories. No more silence. No more accepting their loss quietly. The universe learned an important lesson. You do not mess with a mother's child. You do not hide behind complex laws. You do not treat living beings like objects. The resistance had become something much larger than Hyun-Ki had ever imagined. What started as a personal mission of revenge had transformed into a universal movement of justice. Alien species were forced to change their research protocols. New universal laws were being written. Ethical guidelines that had been ignored for generations were now being strictly enforced. Hyun-Ki had changed everything. One mother. One mission. Total universal transformation. She looked at her son's photograph. "We did it," she whispered. The universe would never be the same again. The trial happened in a massive universal court. Not on Earth. Not on any single planet. But in a special station built to represent every species. Hyun-Ki sat quietly. The research directors from the Krelvax facility stood before the universal court. Their once proud bodies looked broken. Years of hiding had come to an end. No more secrets. No more protection. Jae-hoon's complete research file sat on the main display. Every single document. Every piece of evidence. His work became the weapon that would bring justice. The lead researcher tried to speak. His translator showed fear more than words. "We did not understand," he said. "Research requires exploration." Hyun-Ki's response was simple. Exploration is not destruction. Millions watched the broadcast. Parents who had lost children. Survivors of research programs. People from hundreds of different species. They all waited for the verdict. The universal court was different now. Changed by the movement Hyun-Ki had started. No more closed doors. No more hidden truths. Evidence showed everything. How Jae-hoon had been treated. How many others had suffered. The complete breakdown of ethical research practices across multiple star systems. Each document was like a knife cutting through old protections. The Krelvax research directors would not just lose their positions. They would face complete legal punishment, not just from one species, but from a united universal court. Hyum-Ki was not seeking total destruction. She wanted accountability. Hours of testimony followed. Technical experts explained the research violations. Medical professionals showed the human cost. Legal teams broke down every single legal protection that had been misused. Her son's memory was everywhere, not as a victim, but as the reason everything changed. The Universal Court's judgment was clear. Complete shutdown of the research facilities, permanent ban on certain types of research, heavy financial penalties, criminal charges that would impact multiple generations. But Hyun-Ki wanted more than punishment. She wanted understanding. A new universal research ethics code was being written, based on the evidence from Jae-hoon's work, based on the stories of survivors, based on the principle that scientific curiosity must never come before basic life respect. The court asked her to speak. Hyun-Ki stood up. No prepared speech, no complex legal language, just a mother's truth. My son believed in science, she said. He believed in understanding. He believed that different species could learn from each other. What happened to him was not science. It was something else. Silence filled the court. Her words were translated into hundreds of languages, broadcast across thousands of communication systems. The Krelvax research directors were sentenced, not just to prison, but to spend the rest of their lives helping rebuild the systems they had broken, teaching ethical research, showing how science should actually work. Jae-hoon's research became a universal standard. A memorial was established, not just a simple statue, but a complete research institute dedicated to ethical scientific exploration, named after him, funded by the very organizations that had once protected unethical research. Hyun-Ki watched it all happen. She had started this journey alone, a mother seeking justice for her son. She was not alone anymore. Hundreds of parents who had lost children joined her. Their network became a universal support system, a way to ensure no other family would suffer the same loss. Years of work, years of fighting, years of pushing against impossible systems had changed everything. She looked at her son's photograph one last time. "We did it," she whispered again. The universe listened.